How's the food? Good? Fair enough, you didn't eat. You're not eating. You're on a diet. You know, the reason I got this shirt was the only one that I gave up smoking like 2 months ago. I replaced it with snacking. It's not going well for me. Have you been here before the lunch? You attended Daniel's talk, right? It really hit me. So I need to start to look up what I'm putting inside my body, what I'm eating. Because being in a good physical condition, eating the right things, having the right state of mind makes you a better developer and professional all around. Now, we're looking good. A lot of people in the room. We're ready to start, right? Now, one thing to keep in mind, we did the switcher loop. So if you came here for Alexander's talk about configuration files, that one's going to happen at 25 past 3, right? So we switched speakers, right? So if you came for that talk, please come back later. We did not miss it. We're going to talk about something very interesting now. Now, when you're talking about DevOps, we don't have tools. We have tool sheds, tool chains. There are lots of tools. It's mostly about tools, I might say. So if you ever wondered why you need all those 8 tools to deploy a static website, this might be an interesting talk for you, right? Our next speakers have probably uninstalled more plugins that we regularly installed in our careers. We're having Kalle Sirkesalo from Code. We're talking about DevOps tools today. Welcome to the stage with a big round of applause.
So, hello everybody. I'm Kalle Sirkesalo. I work as the CTO of Managed Services for Code. And I've been working with DevOps for probably 15 years now, but 11 in Code. And I work as the CTO of Managed Services, so I founded one product. Okay, that's one. And I've been building cloud instances and development tool chains for over 100 customers so far over the years. During summers, I like to sail. So any sailing jokes and so on, I won't understand them because I'm bad at sailing, but I'm learning. It's all about learning across things. So about 12 months ago, I got from my boss a privilege of starting to go through our 1,600 customers and start collecting from them information about how do they develop software. And I started from the point of view that GitLab told me that 62% of the developers are using more than 6 tools to make development. So 62% of the companies are having more than 6 tools for their developers. After the first analysis, I came to a conclusion that GitLab is wrong and everybody has more than 6 tools. They probably looked at the very beginning of the pipeline. So if you look at over there, doesn't work, doesn't matter. You would see it GitLab, GitHub, Jenkins, so on. So that's the kind of things that we see usually when we build things. But DevOps is not about building things, as we probably know. It's about creating operational software, probably some value, and hopefully making things better. And this is kind of a beast of a picture. And I can tell you this is simple. Most customers would be happy if they had this picture. We started working with Daimler Truck on their toolchain when they were split from Mercedes-Benz. So Daimler Corporation split into 2, and they became 2 corporations. And while taking over Daimler Truck toolchains, we aimed to reduce them as much as possible because they had over 100,000 employees on the day 1. So you can imagine how many tools, things, everything you have when you bring in 100,000 employees on a brand new company. So we took a goal of cleaning it up, and we got 40% of the tools away. Now they only have like 25 tools in the pipeline. And we're working on it still. So that's something that you can do. So you can remove the tools that I'm talking about. You can consolidate. You can make things better. You don't have to. There might be good reasons for it. But just giving you inspiration. A big corporation can do it. Most of your corporations can probably do it. Then on the other side of the fence, we're talking about AI a lot. Like, I'm writing my master's thesis at the moment about AI. And everything there says 16% increase in productivity, 25% increase in productivity. Well, I did math, and I tried to explain to my customers, if you have a 50 people in your development organization, and you say AI is going to bring you 8% increase in performance, it means you brought in one development team's worth of productivity. So, is it really doing it? Are we doing that? Well, it's not really AI doing it. It's actually the fact that when we take into use AI, we start standardizing our ways of working. We start finding improvements on our productivity that we all know there used to be. Like, how many of you have made a quick script with ChatGPT that would have taken like a day of work before, and it took 5 minutes with ChatGPT? Way less than I assumed. But the aim of that is we can be way more effective now, because the short work that used to be really quick, but the quick was 1 day, is now actually that half an hour, and you can really improve your workflow. And then you can take it and tell your friend about improving that. And this creates the major cost savings and major improvements that we see when we talk about how do we do things. So these are the thin bits, because my marketing guy told me, Kalle, you have to tell everybody what is the in it for them when they do it. And now I'm going to go actually what did I do and what is it looking like. So how do I do this? Because in research, you have to always tell people your mentality and what do you do. So I've been doing 90-minute sessions by myself with the customers, and I've had 50 customers, and they're chief architects, their platform engineering team leads, head of DevOps, sitting with me and feeling a picture. And after that, I present to them findings and tell them what should we do together. So what are we feeling? We're feeling their software factory. And nobody can see what is in there, because like the quality isn't that great, but we all know it's a big picture. So it all starts here in the left, the green box, which is the important box. That's where the development team sits. That's where we create the value. Everything else in this pipeline is basically like, doesn't create any other value than exists. In here, on the left side, applications. So that's where the value actually starts turning into visible thing for the management, because the end user is over there. It can be another application, it can be your internal users, but at the end of the day, if the software was never released, it doesn't create any value. So then we, smart people in development, decide to start adding tools to help us make things faster. Anybody remember SVN? Okay, we have some people who are as old as me in IT. SVN was the version control that we used in the history. And now we moved to Git. And nobody remembers what's Git, because everybody's like, but GitHub, GitLab. But the intention was that SVN was so that when you push things, it's controlled in the master server, versus in Git, it's on your own laptop. Big difference, a lot of philosophy behind it. But it enabled us to create more tooling, more flexible ways of working, and enabled us to add tools. So what did we do? This is what it actually looks like now. So the blue boxes are the additional things that we put in under terms continuous integration, or continuous deployment, or environment management, ETL, monitoring. We have big terms that we've broken down into smaller boxes. So if I ask you, what does your continuous integration pipeline look like? How many of you can tell me what tools go there? Okay, a few people raised their hands. If I ask you, what language do you build? How many of you can answer? Okay, we're not really resilient here. If I ask you what are you using for testing? Okay, 2 people. Okay. Well, it's after lunch, I know. So, what does this actually look like at the customer? This is the real life situation at the organizations in enterprise scale. So when I go in and I start talking with the customer, the pink boxes are technologies. You can notice that in here, you can find this cluster of development languages. So if you've ever worked with like C, C++, C#, Java, Node.js, TypeScript, Bash, Python, you're going to have all of them in most organizations. And that creates quite enough hard handovers in the organization. So, okay, we understand why you need different tools for different things, which are creating different applications. But then you have 3 different version controls. So if I have a log4j, anybody remember log4j? 1 person, 2 person, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we have some. This is the most people have lifted. So it was a big vulnerability in dependencies. If you have 3 sources where you're looking for the version, what do we have it, where is it, what's happening, you can't really react to it, because it needs 3 different admins to look for it, and then you're like constantly asking people, are we sure we don't have some code? And if you have 3 version controls, you probably have a 4th and a 5th somewhere. Controversial, I know it. But, so what are we doing as an industry? Like, this is looking pretty horrible in my opinion, but like, it's not that bad. We're gonna platform engineer it away, right? Like we're gonna make it so that the developers can write code and it gets deployed and it's someone else's job to look after these tools. So this is the landscape of CNCF at the moment, what they're working on, what has already graduated, and what's in the sandbox. So this is the amount of tools that we are planning to use in our landscape of modernization. This is what we're doing in the platform engineering side to enable us to be faster, which is fantastic. But if you think about it, if you already are in here, and you're adding, let's say, 10% of these tools there, it's going to be quite expensive. And that's just the current way of working 3 years ago. Now we're talking about AI being the biggest opportunity in software development. 60% of the teams see productivity increase when they use AI, and we see 45% faster releases with AI. But at the same time, organizations can't implement it because they don't have any of the processes in place. They don't have any of the ways of working in place. Most of you probably don't have the data lake or data structures, data access policies, capability of doing things. And then on the top of that, it would have to be integrated to your workflows. But your managers probably don't even know how are you working. So how would they tell you, this is where you put Copilot, this is the AI tool you need? They probably just buy whatever Microsoft tells them, or AWS, or Google, and hope that it solves things. So this is the facts at the moment. So any guesses what AI and data looked before LLMs? So this is the landscape in your data team that they were already working with, and that is coming to your DevOps pipelines as part of the pipelines that we are going to see as part of the AI. So that leads me to my current trends that I found when I was working with customers. So I kind of mentioned a few of them already. Most organizations have more than 1 version control. How many of you only have 1 version control in use in your organization? About half of you. That's good. That's really good because it means you can build on top of that. You can create processes. You can create ways of working. You can notice that I did it with my hand because we have 2 in my organization. But it's due to business reasons. But anyway, again, you can't have common pipelines if you don't have common tooling in the baseline of development. Then, How many of you have actually gotten Copilot so that you know every colleague of yours uses it, or GitLab Duo, or how many of you have not gotten AI at all? So some hands are lifting, yeah. So we've noticed that most customers don't actually, they all say we have AI, and then you ask, so how many people are using it? And they're like, we have one team POCing it, or we have one pilot team using it. Or my favorite answer, you can go to ServiceNow and open a ticket and you get the license in 2 days. So how many of your colleagues that are not here today are going to go to ServiceNow and open a ticket and get the Copilot, let alone know how to use it? Very few, because you're the innovators here. And that's hard to know when you have the Copilot already in use. Common tools and practices is something that every manager of yours hopes, because then they could reflect with the other teams. They could be like, hey, how's it going with you? What works? How does it work? But the reality is that most of the teams are completely in their own silo, and the managers are kind of like, we're kind of alone with this product, when in reality, same practices apply, same business cases apply, same ways of working apply in most teams. If you're a mainframe programmer, I'm sorry, you have a very different pipeline. But if you're doing Java, Node.js, TypeScript, it's pretty much the same stuff happening all around. It's about talking and having a similar kind of pipeline. My favorite. Most organizations have very messy deployment processes. How many of you could tell me your deployment process in 2 sentences? Okay, 3, 4 people, so maybe 10% of here. I can tell you that most of the customers couldn't explain their deployment process or release process. They were most of the time, well, which one of them do you want to hear? And at that point, you know, okay, how many do you have? 7. How do you know if something impacts this and that and those? So how do you manage dependencies in your organization? The correct answer, of course, is you don't have to, because you develop software so that things don't break. But in corporate world, you really aren't there in most cases. This surprised me the most. I love the previews, but this surprised me the most. Because I see Kubernetes as the API platform that you build your development on top, where you build new ways of working, new structures, and new approaches. But in enterprise, it ended up being the place where you move the old stuff from virtual machines to something that you can manage better. They are not using Kubernetes for the brand new stuff. That goes to serverless, because it has a lower cost. They can more easily use the cloud-native features of the cloud that they chose, and they can get more features out of it. And Kubernetes turns out to be the place where you dump everything that doesn't go to serverless yet. And that surprised me very much, because I thought like Kubernetes is going to be the bleeding edge. Licenses, so if you have license for Duo, if you have license to GitLab, if you have license to Jira, if you have license to anything else in your organization, most of your organizations don't know that you have it, and most of them don't know are you using it, but they're paying for it. So most of the customers that I was talking to had a trouble of understanding how much are they actually using what tool, and getting that metric was difficult for them, because they didn't know who is using it, how much, and what is it doing in their pipeline. So you would assume, if you've been in the product track, for example, that engineering and product would be kind of integrated. We at DevOps would try to do cycles quickly and work together with product management. Well, based on my findings, we end up actually in a state where product management is its own, I don't know what it's called in English, but like castle in the sky. And the developers are in the ground doing the work based on what they're being told to. And when you ask them, so how do you manage portfolio? What has been promised to management and why? How many of you can answer that question, by the way? Yeah, so might be the ones again. But it's very hard as a developer to know what and why are we doing things. How many of you have Confluence, SharePoint, Teams, Slack as a documentation platform, GitHub, GitLab. Yeah, so most of the time, documentation doesn't exist in one place. So when you want the organization to actually move to one direction, and for example, 24/7 operations are usually consolidated. Incident management is usually consolidated. How do you tell them where are the playbooks if you don't know yourself where the playbooks are per application? Because you wrote one in Confluence, one in SharePoint, and one in GitHub. Well, that's why we invented Backstage, by the way. It can really do it well, that you can link the documentation there, and then the support team doesn't need to know, they find it in Backstage. How many of you have a good and well-defined testing and quality process? Wow, I found 3. That's more than I usually find. So this is something that usually makes people laugh, because they're like, who has it? What is quality? What's testing? But it's something that like, it should be at least defined, that where are we aiming at? What's the process that we're trying to get to? What does it look like? Most of the customers that I talked to told me that they have a very high push for security. I work with high regulated industries, and that security is the most important thing in their field. Then I asked, so how much funding do you have? And they told me, if you can do it with open source tools, that would be the best, because we don't really have a budget. So that led to the whole thing of fragmentation. So if I would throw the security pipeline there, that's the worst fragmented tooling, because everybody is saving money on the tools in security with the cost of developers. So the developers have to learn 7 different tools to cover SCA, SAST, DUST, EAST, all the other short terms that you have to know if you want to do security, which leads to heavy knowledge gap in there that you would actually follow the security tooling, versus just enabling one tool that covers all of them. It doesn't mean that the one tool would be the best. Most organizations don't know their open source dependencies. So I have another slide coming up, but how many of you have done the React quick start, which no longer exists? Okay, 2 people. That one has 1,000 open source libraries. When you type that React quick start in the history, you got 1,000 libraries in your machine. If you today install Next.js, it has 250 open source dependencies in it. Most customers don't have any system to track these, know what you have, and what went into the software. It's regulated by the law next year, or 2027, sorry, but it's coming, like, the regulation for this is coming, but we don't even have a system for it. We deployed asset and environment management, but most customers are like, what is asset management? What is environment management? And then you ask, like, so what environments do you have? Production, staging, testing, okay. How do you know what went where and what's going on there? If you're doing GitOps, this is, by the way, automatically in your version control, which is really nice. But if you're not, it's pretty difficult. Secret management is an afterthought. How many of you think secret management is the correct term? Okay, you all know this is bluffing if I ask it that way. So secret management is anyway the wrong term for secret management, because we are not actually keeping secrets when we put them in HashiCorp Vault, Azure Key Vault, or anywhere else. We're keeping tokens. Because if it was secret, it wouldn't be in your terminal as a command line variable that you use to develop the software. Because it's on everybody's terminal. And that means it's not a secret, because everybody knows this thing that is 46 characters long is this. You just don't remember it, but you know the secret. So it's not a secret. So then if you ask the customer after that, how do you rotate the secrets? They're like, why would I ever rotate my tokens? And then you look at security. Anytime someone pushes secrets to the version control, you have to rotate them all. Operations, so if you have still separate operations from development, which you shouldn't in DevOps, but we all know we are not there. I've seen it often that they have this amazing answer to all their developers. There's a Grafana, go check there if the CPU is spiking. There's a Grafana, you have a heavy memory consumption. There's a Grafana, why are we giving 500s? That's not really like helping the developer do their work. That's giving them more work. Most organizations also split their organization by developers and business in communication already. So if you have a Teams and a Slack, you know your developers are in Slack, but the business people deciding on everything is in Teams. So you are not actually visible to the people deciding on your budget at all, and your technological jargon doesn't even affect them thinking that it's hard. Just someone else is telling them that. And backstage, so platform engineering's IDP, so internal developer portal, is everybody wants it. Everybody wants it to be solved, and everybody wants it to do it quickly. But my research says also that backstage requires 10-person team. So you need 10 people in a big corporation, minimum, to start deploying backstage, start getting it into use, create an API definition, get everybody to start onboarding, and get everybody to understand things. So, what can we do about it? And why is it a problem that this is happening? Well, we're in a pretty crucial growth pattern on malicious packages, open source dependencies, and laziness on updating things. So, because we are so full of different tools, busy with different tooling and understanding different tooling, we might have the answer that, hey, we have a log4j here. But nobody has time to actually figure out it's there and it needs updating. And that leads to a situation where 3 years later, now 4, log4j is 13% of the time downloaded as a malicious version. So 13% of the time, people are still downloading the version that didn't fix the vulnerability that we are talking about. And most of the time, when you talk to developers, they are like, hey, but the OSS component doesn't really have an update. 0.5% of the dependencies don't have an update. So the developers of the dependencies, the open source components, and so on, they actually fix the security vulnerabilities quite fast because it's in use in their production software. They developed it for their own softwares. So most of the time, things are in order. 80% of the applications that we use do not update their dependencies in 12 months. I know it's a pain, but that's why we have renovate pods, deploy pods, and other automation tools. So we can do it easier. And 4% of the time, we update the things to the already vulnerable version again. Because we didn't know. Our tooling doesn't block us, and we're not there. So next slide is for your management. You can use this for management also, but they don't really understand getting afraid because they're like, how likely is this happening at us? It's only 13%. Benefits for consolidating and standardizing software development. So creating one platform and starting building around it are tangible, and you can actually measure most of them. You can improve the collaboration across projects, because you can actually talk about the dependencies that you use. You can actually create common pipelines and templates. How many of you know your team is only using IAC that you developed? So infrastructure as code, Terraform, ARM, Bicep, cloud formation, whatever, that you developed for this application and nobody else is using it. So I'm the only one who has that kind of thing. Damn, you have a good platform engineering teams. Most of the time, we have a lot of things that we have already solved once, but we haven't shared across the organization. You can improve the capacity to innovate. Because when you have a capability of doing things faster, platform engineering, remember, you can innovate. Because you can start doing a weekend, on Friday, a hackathon, and sort out an issue by Monday, and deploy it to production. You can improve the security posture, because again, we can improve all of those pipelines, automate the things, and make things better. We can improve our satisfaction as a developer. How many of you like to go to Artifactory to check why is the package vulnerable? Okay, this time nobody lifted their hands for real. You can improve the visibility of what are you doing across the organization. So when you want to communicate that, hey, we're going to be late due to X, Y, and Z, it's actually visible with the metrics that the management tracks, because you can create those, which is the improving metrics quality. So you can actually point out that, hey, we are really bad at testing in our organization compared to the others. Can we please get some testing, like quality teams time? And it improves the mean time to recovery, especially now with AI, because if you have all of the documentation how other people solve things, guess what you can do? You can automate with AI the recovery of your system with the previous incidents that the others did. So now your organization is always learning about the incidents. So that's all the positive things. But how about looking at it as a manager who is like, we need to do cost savings, we can't invest? Well, you can actually reduce the maintenance costs and effort. You can reduce the technical support team and the need of that. You can reduce the license costs and have employees working faster on the projects, because the onboarding goes down. So I wrote this business case with my colleague for one customer. They gave us the 15% increase in their Canadian office, and they're in Europe, and they have a problem that they need to get an European AI running. And we were expecting them to get about 7.5% increase in benefit. And we calculate them a business case if they would get the 15% increase their Canadian office saw for about a $500,000 investment. They ended up making it back in 6 months, assuming we would be doing 7.5% on those 6 months. So I have the buttons from. So this is not really non-tangible. You can actually prove it to your managers. You can actually get them to invest on solving these problems. You can actually get them to sort these things out. And the success is more than technical. Like, I'm talking heavy technicalities. So we're talking about some parts automated, manual work minimizations. We're talking about making refactoring and trying to find those magic bullets. But it's just work that we're doing. Business there is like thinking about, why would I pay for this? I have other incentives, like this is no way improving our things. It's no way pushing us forward. It's no way critical for us. And culture is, why wasn't I consulted? Why didn't someone ask me, should I do it? I don't want to use my favorite tool. This is the most critical tool that we have. And the ivory tower doesn't even know what we're doing. Ivory tower was the word that I was looking for. But if we succeed, we can actually tackle all three of these at the same time. Because we're talking to all stakeholders by talking about simplification, coordination, and standardization. So effective AI follows this curve. Again, same thing for anything that you do in your organization. You have the innovators bringing in the 10 new tools. Then you have the early adopters bringing the 20 other tools. And then you have the early majority that just adopts anything, and the late majority that says, no, we don't need it. And laggards who say, we've been doing this for 20 years, we know better than you do. The AI adoption is at the moment in the innovation. We're not actually talking about yet being in the early adopters even. You might have some organizations that are in early adopters, but you're still having time to get full value. And there's just for everybody to explain the different phases. Another way of looking at it is platform teams. I was talking about it. So let's move the problem from development to another team and let them standardize on selected tooling. But that requires buy-in from development teams. So if your team is ready to let go of your tools and allow other people to develop your process and ways of working, you can actually migrate to a platform engineering style, which we're doing in many organizations. So you start building a platform where you deploy. So for example, Kubernetes being a fantastic place for a whole organization, if it's a big organization. You start creating common Helm charts, you start creating common ways of working, and you start pushing things forward, making things faster and easier to adopt. Because again, you're not deciding on yourself how do you deploy. You're just sending containers forward and telling these are the variables that I need. I need a PostgreSQL, or I need an Oracle DB. I need it to be this way, and the platform provides. It's really hard to get this started, but you're going to get really good benefits out of it. But it requires you to change your mindset. So we started at waterfall in history when we started developing software. Then we went to Agile, but releases were not really a thing. Then we went to Agile and we gave permission to the Agile team to deploy. Then we went to, hey, let's bring designers into the team and let's be sufficient against the business. Then we thought that we went to DevOps and we told everybody that you build it, you run it. And we tried to tell everybody that now you're in charge of your system. Then we went to feature factories where we added requirements in there. Now we're going product teams and product team management. And now look at this responsibility growth that has been going on for us developers. So DevOps culture was all about developers and operations working together. But what we did is we ended up doing, hey, developers, here's some Azure for you. Figure out how to do it. And we added more tools to support that. Then we realized, well, let's put the UX person there also and expect them to develop also. And maybe now, with adoption of AI, we can actually do the work that we are supposed to do. But the reality is we're stuck and busy with all the other stuff that we wanted to do. So we have to start figuring out how are we doing these things and where do we take them. And that's my last slide about you build it and you run it, what to think about. So when you start thinking about platform engineering, you have to start understanding that on the left, build part should be in development team's responsibility, and run part should come from the platform. If you're trying to do the build and run together at the same place, you're going to burn out your teams. And there has to be a feedback loop. If you don't have a feedback loop, how would the platform team know what you're going to be building? And how would you know what they're monitoring? So basically, we have hope in state of DevOps, but we're going to have to do some work to reduce the tooling. Thank you. Any questions? You can also clap now.
Great talk. So, do you have questions for Kalle?
You won't be able to catch me after this. Oh, there is.
Here.
As I understood, you work with different companies and you propose them different stack of software. Do you propose the same stack for every company and you have like a golden
No.
equivalent, or do you adapt on the...
Yeah, I understood the question. Yeah, so there is no golden path, because why I do the analysis is that I actually suggest everybody a different tooling. Because the big thing is you have history. My favorite is customers that are like, we have 10 years of history. I'm like, yeah, 10 years is nice, but I have customers that have 200 years of legacy. They have legacy before computers still affecting their ways of working today. And you need to think about that when you align these systems and think about the systems. So you can't just be like, okay, GitLab is going to solve all of this, or GitHub is going to solve all of this. That's not the answer. Like, you have to keep certain processes and things in place, and you prioritize the things where you have a real big pain. So I usually start by, right now we're controlling version control a lot. Because most customers are thinking about the next version control system that they have. How is that going to look like? Because that's going to tie up to their AI strategy and AI workflows. The second thing that I'm affecting a lot with customers is their infrastructure as a code. So I'm working with the customer on finding infrastructure as a code that they already have in use somewhat, and figuring out how do we start templating those infrastructure as a codes. So how do we actually create collaboration between the teams? And that's usually the two top priority goals. Then we also have things like the whole security pipeline. If you have a SNUC already in use, for example, I'm not going to tell you to go to someone else's tooling. I'm probably going to say, what about buying everything from SNUC and actually having the holistic view in one place at the beginning? And then when we find it doesn't cover certain things, we bring in a new tool. But rather reducing the tools at the beginning. If you already have a perfectly working security system, I'm not going to tell you to remove your security system and bring in a new one, because that's not your issue. So, no, there is no golden path. There is multitude of paths, and it always depends on the company's history and legacy. For example, I have a customer that has manual deployments because the customer has to have a phone call and a remote desktop information going on with the customer, and they can't click in the UI because the systems are not actually online. So they get print screens from the customer that they are showing in the remote desktop, and they are guiding them through the phone call. So of course they can't deployment automated because they don't have any way of deployment automating it. So it kind of depends on the history and the business that the customer is doing. If you're doing web shops or something very simple like WordPress deployment, you can do all of it in GitHub basically, or you can do all of it with GitLab. But as soon as you start sprintering out from there and creating more business logic, you start needing more and more tools, or more and more thinking around the fact. Any other questions? I hope it answered. Yeah.
We have more questions. You're very, very fast and you know, I started laughing.
He wanted to get me out of the stage.
I wanted to get off the stage, but he realized it's not anyway.
Yeah.
So do we have any more questions? I have one.
Yeah.
I might have gotten the wrong message. You let me know if I'm shooting far. But is there any way in which you can maintain some level of team autonomy while at the same time maintain the frame of sprawl across the organization?
So team autonomy has never required you to actually pick your own tools or select your own tools in the CI and pipeline side. Team autonomy is all about how do we create a product. How do we create the value to the business? How do we solve the business problem? And it all is in the software. It's all in the code that we write. None of it is in the deployment. The deployment is there to keep the software running in the business side. We shouldn't, as programmers, care about how does it get built in reality. Like, it just needs to work in the production for us. Because our goal is to talk to customer and get the customer get value out of it. So team autonomy from my point of view is selecting what are we developing from the backlog, rather than selecting what tools are we using. Tools are kind of there to tell us, prevent us from actually understanding that we are no longer picking the tools, like what are we developing. Someone else is picking that for us, which means we are not talking to the customer. I have a whole talk about that, but yeah. So basically team autonomy is actually selecting what are we developing, which is our main point as a developer. If you're in operations, it's also your main thing of like figuring out what are we improving in the operations.
All right, thank you. I love the perspective. Have you thought of any other questions in the meanwhile?
You have 2 minutes.
All right, we have a question here. Microphone.
I have a question about AI tools.
Yep.
And you work with a company that has tried AI tools and had a bad experience, for example, lowering your productivity.
Yeah, so I've worked with those. It's usually the, hey, we took into it use with ServiceNow. So it all starts by misunderstanding AI. So my boss actually was one of these guys that told me the first thing I made our database, data from our tickets. And he told me, how can you find with LLM top 5 incidents that we have had? I had to tell him, no. LLM doesn't work that way. LLM doesn't do math. Remember that. LLM is math, but it doesn't do math. So what ends up happening is you get wrong answers constantly. So what you have to do is you have to do a hackathon basically with the customer where you explain what can LLM do, what does it solve, and what doesn't it solve. And then you start talking with them about how to solve that. And we've been working with few customers that have had a bad experience, and after training, we've gotten the experience actually to good, because they know it doesn't work by you give it a feature and tell it, hey, develop this. How many of you can take an Epic and develop a software based on that? Yeah, AI doesn't do that either. It needs to be broken down, and you need to actually define what are we doing, why, and what is it coming out of. So that's kind of the key, like getting customers to understand that. Okay, my time is up. You have still question?
You gotta catch up the plane, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Alexander, for getting me this spot. And I recommend staying for bass.
All right. I'm gonna save this while he's still here to tell me if I got this wrong. Now, this was